There are plenty of noises in the forest at night. Branches cracking, owls calling, coyotes howling. But nothing prepares you for a sound that doesn't belong. A sound that shouldn't be there. For us, it was a whistle. A simple tune, carried soft through the trees. The problem was, it was the same tune my buddy had whistled by the fire just hours earlier. And when it came back again, circling our camp in the dead of night, we knew we weren't alone. It was late summer when we took that trip. Me, my friend Tyler, and his younger brother Matt. We were backpacking a remote stretch of forest in Montana, far from the usual trails. The kind of country where you don't see another soul for days, just endless timber and sky. We hiked in nearly 12 miles before making camp along a narrow creek. The trees pressed close on both sides, tall pines dripping with shade, the air cool and damp even in the afternoon sun. It felt isolated in a way that was both freeing and unsettling, like the rest of the world had been cut off behind us. We got camp set, 2 tents, a fire pit ringed with rocks, and gear stacked under a tarp. Dinner was just freeze-dried packs and coffee. But sitting around the fire with the woods pressing in, it felt like luxury. At one point, Tyler whistled a short tune, some little rising and falling notes, almost playful. He said it was a habit from when he hunted, a way to signal he was close by without startling game. Matt tried to copy it, but it came out clumsy and off-key. We laughed, and the sound carried into the trees, sharp against the quiet. As the fire burned low, we leaned back against our packs, staring at the stars that peeked through the canopy. The forest around us had gone silent, except for the creek rushing nearby. That's when I first noticed it. How dark the woods felt when the fire burned low. How heavy the trees seemed, crowding close. I brushed it off as nerves. After all, it was just another camping trip. Nothing out there but us. Or so I thought. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound of rain starting to fall. Just a light drizzle pattering on the tent, nothing heavy. I shifted in my sleeping bag, trying to drift back off. That's when I heard it. Soft, faint, cutting clean through the hiss of rain. A whistle. The same little tune Tyler had played by the fire. Rising and falling notes, almost cheerful if it hadn't been drifting out of the darkness. At first, I thought it was him. Maybe unable to sleep, sitting by the dying fire. But when I turned my head, I saw his shape in the faintest glow inside the tent, still zipped up, still breathing slow and heavy. Matt was out cold beside him. The whistle came again, closer. My stomach turned. I sat up, straining to listen. It circled, moving slow around the edge of camp, like someone walking a wide circle and whistling just loud enough for us to hear. I reached over and nudged Tyler hard. He stirred, blinked at me, confused. "What?" "Listen," I whispered. The tune came again. Same notes, same rhythm, but this time from the opposite side of camp. Tyler froze, his eyes going wide. He mouthed, "That's mine." We sat there, rigid as the whistling drifted through the trees. Always the same, always steady, moving around us in slow, deliberate arcs. I fumbled for my flashlight, but didn't switch it on. Something in me knew the beam wouldn't find anyone, that if we saw what was making that sound, it would only be worse. The whistling went on for what felt like hours, circling, pausing, then starting again. And just before dawn, it stopped. Not faded, not trailed off, just cut clean. The forest fell silent. When the first light crept through the trees, I almost didn't believe it was real. The night had stretched so long, the whistling looping again and again, the dawn felt impossible. We unzipped the tent slow, stepping out into the gray morning air. The fire had gone cold, just a circle of wet ash. Everything was damp, the gear under the tarp, our boots, even the trees dripping steady with last night's drizzle. Tyler didn't waste time. He grabbed his rifle and started pacing the edge of camp. "We're gonna see tracks," he muttered, almost to himself. But there weren't any. We searched everywhere, circling outward in the mud and pine needles. The ground was soft from the rain, perfect for catching prints. Our boots from yesterday were clear enough, but beyond that, nothing. No impressions, no broken branches, no signs of anyone walking around us. Matt finally said, "It was the echo. Has to be. Like when you yell and it bounces back funny." Tyler shot him a look that shut him up quick. That wasn't an echo. That was mine. Every note, every pause. I whistled that exact tune and someone gave it back to us. I didn't say anything, but I knew he was right. Echoes don't circle you. Echoes don't change direction. The rest of the morning we moved quick, eating in silence, packing faster than usual. The woods didn't feel empty anymore. They felt watched. We hiked all day, hoping distance would shake off whatever had stalked us the night before. 12 miles deeper, through ridges and valleys so thick with pines you barely saw the sky. By evening, we found a flat stretch near a small meadow and set up again. Tyler wanted to keep a fire blazing through the night. Matt argued it would attract attention. In the end, we compromised. Built one, but kept it small. The rain never returned, but the woods felt heavier, like the silence was pressing in. Even the creek nearby ran quiet, trickling instead of rushing. I remember thinking it was the stillest place I'd ever been. That night, the whistle returned. It came earlier, just as the fire burned low. The same exact notes Tyler had whistled, carrying soft through the trees. Matt groaned, pulling his sleeping bag over his head. Not again. But Tyler sat bolt upright, rifle in hand, eyes locked on the dark. His jaw clenched, the way it does when you're holding back rage. The tune circled, closer this time. It wasn't drifting wide arcs anymore. It was just beyond the tree line, like whoever was whistling wanted us to know how near they were. At one point, the sound stopped directly behind my tent. I held my breath, staring at the thin nylon wall. For a long moment, nothing. Then a soft puff of air, like someone exhaling close enough to touch the fabric. Tyler unzipped his tent halfway and shouted, "You show yourself or I swear!" The whistle cut him off, shrill and loud, right from the other side of the fire. He fired a shot into the trees. The blast echoed through the valley, birds scattering in panic bursts. The forest fell silent. We sat frozen, ears ringing, hearts pounding. And then, softer this time, almost mocking, the whistle began again. The exact same tune. None of us slept after that shot. The whistling went on for hours, circling, fading, returning again, never rushing, never panicked. Whoever or whatever was out there seemed to have endless patience. By dawn, our nerves were raw, every sound making us flinch. When the first light broke through the canopy, the tune finally stopped. Just cut off mid-note, like someone had been standing there and simply shut their mouth. We didn't bother with breakfast. We packed in silence. Tyler with his rifle slung tight, Matt pale and jittery. Every time I looked back into the trees, I expected to see someone standing there, just watching. We hiked out hard and fast, covering miles without talking. The deeper we got, the more the woods looked the same. Wet trunks, dark undergrowth, long stretches of silence. But even as the trailhead came into view, I swore I heard it one last time. A faint whistle, the same little tune, just a note or two slipping through the trees like it was carried on the wind. I told myself it was my imagination, but I knew Tyler heard it too. His eyes met mine and he didn't say a word. To this day, whenever I'm in the woods, I can't stop myself from listening. Not for coyotes, not for bears, for that whistle. The one I know wasn't ours anymore.
Old shelters are scattered all through the deep woods. Places hunters once built, or loggers, long before the trails were mapped. Most are nothing more than rotted beams and moss-covered stones. But some feel like they've been waiting. We found one on a stormy evening, half collapsed, tucked away off the trail. At first it felt like luck, somewhere dry to get out of the rain. But by morning, we realized we never should have stepped inside. And when we tried to find it again, it was gone. There were 3 of us on that hike. Me, my friend Claire, and her cousin Derek. We'd been pushing through backcountry all day, planning to make camp near a ridge. But late afternoon, dark clouds rolled in fast, swallowing the sky. By the time the first thunder cracked, we knew we weren't making the ridge before the storm hit. The rain came heavy and sudden, sheets pouring through the pines. Our rain jackets were useless against it, water soaking through in minutes. The trail turned to a stream under our boots, every step a squelch of mud.
We were starting to panic about where to set up tents when Derek spotted it, a sagging shape just off the trail. At first I thought it was a pile of logs, but as we pushed closer, it took form. A hunting shelter, built from thick timbers, roof half caved but walls still standing. It looked ancient, leaning under the weight of moss and rot, but it was shelter. Better than drowning out here, Derek said, already pushing inside. Claire hesitated. I felt it too, the wrongness of it. The way it seemed swallowed by shadows even in the stormy daylight. But rain was soaking us to the bone, and we didn't have another option. So we ducked inside. and immediately I wished we hadn't. The air inside was heavy, thick with the smell of damp rot and something older, like mildew soaked into the bones of the place. The timbers creaked with every gust of wind, water dripping steady through gaps in the roof. At first glance, it looked abandoned for decades. A rusted lantern sat on a crooked shelf. A moth-eaten blanket slumped in the corner, stiff with mold. There was even an old coffee tin, dented and spotted with rust, lying on its side. But as we set our packs down, I noticed things that didn't match the decay. On the far wall, someone had carved marks into the wood. Not initials or dates, lines, crosshatches, strange symbols cut deep and dark, as if they'd been made recently. A stub of candle sat near the carvings, wax pooled fresh down its side. Not yellowed, not ancient, fresh. And near the doorway, faint scuffs in the dirt, like boot tracks. Not clear enough to tell direction, but too sharp to be from decades past. "Guess somebody still uses this place," Derek muttered, trying to sound casual. He ran a hand across the carvings, then pulled it back fast, like the wood was colder than it should have been. Claire's face had gone pale. "I don't like this. We should pitch the tents outside." The rain hammered harder on the roof, wind howling through the trees. Outside was a wall of water. Derek shook his head. "We'll stay. It's just a shack, nothing else." But even as he said it, the storm seemed to muffle, as if the woods outside were holding their breath. And for the first time, I noticed how quiet it was in that shelter. Too quiet, like the storm itself didn't want to come inside. By the time darkness closed in, the rain hadn't let up. It hammered the roof in waves, pouring through cracks, dripping steadily into little puddles on the dirt floor. We lit our headlamps, their glow casting long shadows across the warped timbers. None of us spoke much. The longer we sat there, the heavier the place felt. It wasn't just the smell of rot, it was the sense of being unwelcome, like the shelter itself was leaning closer, listening. We unrolled our bags, ate a cold dinner in silence, and tried to ignore the carvings cut into the wall. I couldn't stop looking at them. Crosshatches, circles, lines overlapping like tally marks. It didn't look like initials or art or anything with meaning we could name. It looked like obsession. Sometime after midnight, I woke to a sound. A shuffle, soft, deliberate. Outside the wall of rain, something moved through the trees.
I held still, straining to listen. Then came another sound. 3 taps against the timbers, slow like knuckles on wood. "Derek," I whispered, "you hear that?" He sat up, eyes wide. "Yeah." Claire stirred, pulling her bag tighter around her. "It's the storm," she muttered, though her voice cracked. But then it came again. 3 hollow taps, this time near the doorway. We froze, staring at the gap in the wall where rain streamed in silver sheets. No shadow, no figure, just storm. When we finally dared to look around the shelter, something else had changed. The candle stub by the carvings was standing upright now, where before it had been lying on its side. Wax dripped fresh across the wood. And one of the strange symbols, the one Derek had touched earlier, looked deeper, freshly carved. None of us slept much. The shuffling outside came and went through the night, sometimes close, sometimes fading into the trees. Every so often, the hollow tapping returned. 3 deliberate knocks against the wall, as if reminding us we weren't alone. When dawn finally bled gray through the cracks in the roof, we packed fast. None of us spoke about the candle, or the carvings, or the sounds. We just wanted out. By mid-morning, the rain had eased to a mist, and we were back on the trail. The farther we walked, the lighter I felt, like whatever weight had pressed on us inside that shelter stayed behind. But about a mile out, Derek stopped cold. He cursed under his breath. My knife, I left it in there. Claire and I both groaned, but he wouldn't let it go. It's my grandfather's. I can't just leave it. Reluctantly, we turned back. The trail was muddy, but familiar. Our boot prints still fresh. We followed him straight to where the shelter had stood. Only, it wasn't there. The clearing was empty. No walls, no roof sagging under moss. Just a scatter of rotted logs half swallowed by ferns, so decayed they crumbled at a touch. It looked like they hadn't been part of a building in decades. Derek stood in silence, jaw tight, like he wanted to argue with what his eyes showed him. Claire just stared at the ground, pale as chalk. Me, I felt my stomach drop, because when I looked at one of those crumbled logs, I swore I saw carving. Faint, worn down by rot, but familiar. A circle with cross hatches through it. The same shape Derek had touched the night before. We stood there longer than we should have, rain dripping from the branches, staring at nothing but moss and rot. Derek walked in slow circles, as if the shelter might reappear if he looked hard enough. Claire wouldn't step closer, wouldn't even meet our eyes. She just kept whispering, "It wasn't like this. It wasn't like this." Finally, I pulled them both away. "It's gone. Whatever we saw, it's gone." We didn't argue. We just hacked fast, hardly stopping, the weight of that place following us like a shadow. Back in town, we didn't tell anyone. What could we say? That we found a cabin that vanished overnight? That carvings looked freshly cut on walls that had rotted away years ago? People would have laughed, or worse, believed us. But I still dream about it. About those markings carved deep into wet wood, a candle flickering by their side. About the feeling that the shelter hadn't been abandoned at all. It had been waiting. And sometimes, when I pass old hunting shacks or cabins in the back country, I get the same chill in my gut. Like I've already been inside. Like something's waiting for me, to step through the door again.
Hunters don't just disappear from their own camps. If someone goes missing in the woods, there are usually signs. Tracks in the mud, broken branches, a trail leading somewhere. But one stormy night, a man in our hunting party stepped out of his tent and never came back. We searched the woods until our voices were raw, combing every ridge and hollow. The only thing we ever found was his rifle, propped neatly against a tree. No prints in the mud, no sign of where he had gone. And the strangest part, it was bone dry, even after the storm. There were 4 of us on that trip. Me, my Uncle Ray, his longtime friend Mark, and a younger guy named Shane. We'd hunted together plenty over the years, mostly deer and elk, sometimes just trips for the excuse of being out in the backcountry. This was deep country, ridges of pines that rolled on forever, valleys no one had lived in for generations.
We set up camp just before dark, a small clearing not far from a ridge that gave us a view of the valley. Fire ring in the center, canvas tents pitched side by side, rifles leaning nearby. The air was sharp with pine and wood smoke, the kind of clean cold you only get high up in the timber. Mark was the seasoned one, late 50s, grizzled beard, the kind of guy who could field dress a deer in the dark and still have energy to cook afterward. He was always calm, always steady, and we trusted him more than anyone when it came to the woods. That evening we sat by the fire, passing around jerky and coffee, swapping old stories. Shane cracked jokes. Ray argued about the best spots. Mark listened with that quiet smile of his. Everything felt safe, ordinary. But later, when the clouds rolled in and the first thunderheads started growling over the ridge, the night shifted. The storm was building, and none of us knew what it was about to take. By midnight, the storm was on top of us. Rain hammered the tents so hard it sounded like gravel hitting canvas. Thunder rolling through the valley until the ground trembled under our cots. The fire had drowned hours earlier, leaving the camp black except for the occasional flash of lightning. We lay in our tents, listening to the storm smother the forest. Normally, even in heavy weather, you'd catch a few night sounds. Owls, coyotes, maybe elk bugling in the distance. But that night, the woods were silent. Nothing but water and thunder, as if every living thing had gone still. Somewhere in the dark, a zipper rasped. I lifted my head, listening. Mark's voice carried low through the rain. "Gonna step out a minute." It wasn't unusual. Guys got up at night to relieve themselves, check on gear, smoke under the tarp. I heard his boots squelch once in the mud, then the storm swallowed him. I waited for the sound of him coming back, the zipper opening, a grunt as he settled in. But it never came. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, Ray called out, his voice sharp over the storm. "Mark?" No answer. We lit our flashlights and poked our heads out. The rain poured so thick the beams cut only a few feet before vanishing into white. The clearing was empty. Mark's tent sat zipped, his gear still piled beside it. Ray muttered, he couldn't have gone far, but his face was tight, uneasy. We searched the edge of camp, calling his name until our throats hurt. The storm just swallowed us whole, giving nothing back. By 3 a.m., we had to face it. Mark hadn't just stepped out.
he was gone. The four of us split into pairs, circling the camp with flashlights cutting weak cones through the storm. The rain was relentless, pouring in sheets that blurred the trees into shadows. Every few minutes, lightning lit the valley in stark flashes, and for a heartbeat, the forest looked frozen, silent, still, empty. We called his name again and again. "Mark! Where'd you go? Answer us!" But nothing ever came back, not even an echo. The ground was a swamp of mud, water pooling in every depression. It should have shown prints. Ours were plain as day, filling with rainwater as we watched. But there were no tracks leading away from camp. No scuff marks, no snapped branches. It was as if Mark had stepped into the storm and been erased. Shane kept insisting he must have wandered off the trail, lost his footing. But even in the downpour, we all knew Mark wouldn't have topped a stumble. He'd hunted this kind of country for decades. We searched until our batteries ran low, our voices raw. Every so often, one of us thought we heard something, like movement just out of range or a low grunt. But the storm swallowed it before we could be sure. By dawn, the rain thinned to a mist, but there was still no sign of him. His gear sat untouched in his tent. His jacket, his bedroll, even his spare boots, all there. Only he was gone. Ray stood in the center of camp, pale and shaken. "Men don't just disappear," he said flatly. "Not like this." But the woods around us offered no argument, only silence. We pushed further out after sunrise, spreading wider across the ridges. The storm had slowed to a gray drizzle, mist curling low between the trees. With daylight, I thought we'd find something. Prints, a trail, any sign Mark had passed through. But there was nothing. Hours passed, our clothes still soaked, boots heavy with mud. Shane grew jumpy, swearing he saw movement between the pines. Every time we turned our lights or eyes that way, the space was empty. Around midday, Ray called out from the base of a slope. His voice was low, hoarse. "Over here." We hurried to him and saw it. Mark's rifle. It was leaning upright against a tree, as if carefully placed there. Not dropped, not left in haste. Propped neat, stock down, barrel resting at a slight angle. Ray's face was tight as he reached for it. That's his. What froze me wasn't just seeing it there. It was the fact that the rifle was dry, bone dry. The wood clean, the metal without a bead of moisture. After a night of pounding rain, in a forest where everything was slick and dripping, that rifle looked like it hadn't seen a single drop. Shane whispered, "How's that possible?" None of us had an answer. We called his name again, louder this time, voices cracking in the damp air. Nothing, just the steady hiss of rain on pine needles. Ray picked up the rifle, staring at the ground for prints. There were none. No disturbed soil, no scuffs of boots, not even a hint of where Mark might have stood. It was as if the rifle had appeared there on its own, untouched by the storm. That was the moment I stopped believing we'd ever find it. We searched until night fell again, combing ridges, shouting his name until our voices broke. Nothing. No tracks, no scraps of clothing, no broken branches. The woods gave us nothing back. When we finally hiked out and called the sheriff, the official word was predictable. Another missing hunter. Happens every year, they said. The backcountry swallows people. Slips, falls, disorientation. Mark was just another statistic. But the three of us who were there knew better. Mark didn't just vanish. Not with no tracks, no trail, no sign of a struggle. Not with his rifle sitting upright, dry as bone, like it had been placed there on purpose. Ray stopped hunting after that trip. Shane won't talk about it at all. Me, I still go into the woods sometimes, but thunder are different now. When thunder rolls over the ridges and rain hammers the trees, I get the same hollow feeling in my gut, like the forest remembers, like it's still waiting for the next one it wants to take. And every time I pass a tree with a rifle leaning against it, even just in memory, I can't help but think of Mark, somewhere out there in the storm, walking without it.
The forest is never truly quiet. Even in the dead of night, you hear something. The wind shifting the branches, insects buzzing in the grass, owls or coyotes calling out in the distance. That constant background of sound is what makes the woods feel alive. But we stumbled into a clearing where all of it stopped. Not a single bird, not a single insect, not even the wind. Just silence, thick and heavy, pressing against our ears. We thought it was just strange. We didn't realize it was a warning. And to this day, I regret not turning back the second we stepped inside. There were 4 of us on that trip. Me, my college roommate Dan, his girlfriend Leah, and her brother Josh. We weren't hardcore hikers, just weekend adventurers looking for a break from the city. The trail we'd picked was long, winding through deep woods with little traffic, but we figured a couple of days in and out would be manageable. The first hours were normal. The weather was calm, the air cool, the forest alive with the usual chorus. Birds flicked from branch to branch, cicadas buzzed lazily in the heat. Every so often, the wind stirred the canopy, shaking loose a drift of dry needles. But late in the afternoon, I noticed a change. It wasn't sudden, more like the volume had been turned down, one sound at a time. The birds stopped first. Then the insects faded. Even the wind seemed to still, the air going heavy and still. By the time we stopped for a water break, the silence was complete. Dan chuckled nervously and said, "Guess we scared everything off." But it didn't feel like that. It felt like the forest was holding its breath. An hour later, we walked straight into the clearing. The trail narrowed, then opened abruptly, spilling us into a space that didn't belong. A clearing, perfectly round, maybe 40 yards across. The ground was soft with pale grass, damp as though it had just rained, though the sky above was clear. Not a single branch littered the ground, no animal tracks, no fallen needles from the trees crowding the edge. It looked untouched, like no one or nothing had ever crossed it. Josh whistled low. Now that's weird. Leah shot him a look. Don't. I understood why. The silence in that space was crushing. Our boots made the only sound, and even that felt muted, swallowed by the stillness. The air seemed thick, almost heavy in my lungs, like stepping into a sealed room. Dan forced a laugh. Flat ground, plenty of space. This is perfect for camp. I hesitated. Every instinct told me we shouldn't stop here. But the others were already shrugging off packs, grateful for the open space after miles of tight trail. I tried to argue, don't you feel how wrong this is? But they brushed me off. So I dropped my pack too, but unease stuck to me like sweat. The shadows lengthened as we set up tents, the sun sinking behind the ridge line. Firewood was scarce, but we managed a small blaze in the center of the clearing. Its crackle felt deafening in the hush, each snap echoing off the trees as if amplified. That's when I realized something that made my skin crawl. The fire was the only sound. Not a single insect drawn to the flames. Not a flutter of wings in the trees above. Just us and the silence. By the time the tents were up, the last light had drained from the sky. The fire threw long, flickering shadows across the grass, our voices low as if we didn't want to disturb whatever lived in that silence. Josh tried to make jokes, but even he couldn't laugh loudly. Every word we spoke felt like it carried too far, then died too quickly, as though the clearing swallowed sound. Leah sat close to the fire, arms wrapped tight around her knees. I don't like this, she said finally. It feels wrong. Dan shook his head. It's just a meadow. You're letting the quiet get to you. He tossed another branch onto the fire, and the crack echoed unnaturally loud. I wanted to agree with Leah. The stillness had a weight to it, pressing down until I felt the hair on my arms stand up. But where would we go? Hiking back in the dark wasn't an option, and none of us wanted to stumble blind through miles of trees. So, we stayed. As the night deepened, the silence only grew heavier. I could hear every rustle of my jacket, every swallow of water, every breath anyone took. And beyond that, nothing. At one point, I glanced at the tree line. For a split second, I thought I saw movement, a shadow shifting between trunks. But when I blinked, the space was empty. Later, Leah stiffened, staring into the dark. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. We listened hard. Nothing, only the fire. But I saw the way her eyes stayed fixed on one spot just beyond the light, her face pale. We should have left. Every instinct told us so. Instead, we huddled closer to the fire, pretending nothing was wrong. And the clearing waited. The fire burned low, the wood too damp to keep a strong flame. The shadows stretched long across the clearing, flickering, bending. None of us spoke anymore. We just sat, waiting for morning. That's when the footsteps began. Soft, careful, pacing the edge of the clearing, just beyond the firelight. At first I thought it was an animal, but the rhythm was wrong. Too steady, too deliberate. Leah gripped my arm, her nails biting through my jacket. "You hear that?" We all did. Nobody answered. The steps circled slowly, crunching faintly in the grass, then pausing, then moving again. Every time I strained to see, the tree line looked empty, just black trunks dripping with dew. Then came the whisper. At first, it was faint, tangled with the sound of the fire. My name, drawn out in a low hiss. I snapped my head toward the trees, heart pounding. Did you hear that? Josh swallowed hard. It said Dan. Leah shook her head, eyes wide. No, it said mine. The voices overlapped, different for each of us, soft and broken. Just clear enough to hear, but never the same words. We piled more wood on the fire in panic. The blaze roared, sparks shooting into the night, and for a moment the clearing lit bright. Nothing stood at the tree line, but the silence was deeper than ever, pressing in, smothering. Even the fire's roar sounded muted, as if wrapped in cotton. That night felt endless. Every snap of the flames, every shift in our sleeping bags echoed like gunfire in the dead quiet. None of us dared close our eyes. And the whole time I could feel it, that sense of being watched, studied, weighed. Whatever owned that silence wasn't done with us yet. The sky finally lightened, pale blue bleeding through the branches. Dawn never felt so slow. We were packed before the fire had fully died, hands shaking as we shoved damp gear into our packs. None of us said a word. As we left the clearing, the silence followed us for a while, stretching down the trail like it clung to our boots. The forest was still, suffocating, until suddenly it broke. First, a bird call, sharp, ordinary, startling in its normalcy. Then another. The buzz of insects rose. The whisper of wind stirred the canopy. Within minutes, the forest was alive again, so loud it almost hurt my ears. We stopped, all four of us turning back. The clearing was hidden now by the wall of trees, out of sight, but none of us wanted to see it again. We hiked out fast, barely resting, as though something might follow if we slowed down. To this day, I can't explain what happened there. Maybe the clearing was just a strange pocket of nature. Maybe our minds played tricks on us in the silence. But when I think back on that night, the footsteps circling, the voices whispering different words to each of us, I know it wasn't just in our heads. The forest is never truly silent, except once, in that place. And I still wonder what was waiting in the quiet for us to listen.